Alright YouTube, so we are back with some pretty big info for Final Fantasy VII Remake. So yesterday Square Enix actually also dropped an article with a bunch of new screenshots that we did not talk about. I was aware of these, but shout out to the people that did comment on my video to let me know just in case I wasn't aware. I'm always looking around for FF7 Remake info, and if you simply hop on Google, you'll see all the news articles hopping on these new screenshots. So I was definitely aware they existed. We just didn't talk about them yesterday. I wanted to just talk about the stuff that was dropped on Twitter, and that video by itself yesterday, just those couple images we looked at, was like a 5-minute video. And you guys know I don't really do long-form content. Anyways, that out of the way, let's hop right into this. This article and these screenshots give us a lot of info on like story details, location details, a little more in-depth on Aerith, some info on Shiva. So first up, we have this fantastic new image of President Shinra, accompanied by a brief description that says, President Shinra, the current president of the Shinra Electric Power Company, raised the company up from a small arms manufacturer to the massively powerful conglomerate it is today. He can be generous to his allies, but when it comes to business, he's utterly ruthless. He's willing to use cutthroat business tactics to make a profit and eliminate anyone who gets in the way. I love the modern take on President Shinra. I love the way his character model looks, and as I said in yesterday's video, I really hope when it comes to FF7 Remake, he's a much more prominent villain throughout the game. Here we have a new image of Heidegger with a brief description that says, as well as being the director of public security, Heidegger has been President Shinra's right-hand man since the early days of the company. He's just as ruthless as his boss and will do anything to get what he wants, even sacrifice his own subordinates. He's trusted implicitly by the president, and this has made public security the most powerful department within Shinra. Heidegger was a somewhat smaller character in the original Final Fantasy VII, but he's a character that you see throughout most of the game, which makes him a more relevant character, if you want to say that, than President Shinra. So I'm hoping he gets a lot of screen time, because he should be here for the sequels. Here we have a not new image of Rosh, but a better description of him as a character that says, this third-class soldier turned rebel is also known as Speed Demon. He loves bikes, speed, and anyone who can give him a challenge. His comrades, however, find him annoying. He constantly squeals his rear tire and makes them choke on fumes of burnt rubber. It's kind of a weak description. So I'm still not really sure what to make of him as a character because he looks strange. Like, the hairstyle is just weird for his character model. I don't understand why they went that route, and he sounds like he's going to be intentionally an annoying character, but I am still interested in checking out new characters in this game. Next up, we have some new screenshots of Aerith in battle and a description of some of her abilities and actually how she plays in battle. The next screenshots demonstrate how Aerith fights. A press of the square button will make her launch a ranged magic attack. By pressing square in repeatedly or holding the button, successive attacks can be unleashed. In addition, the number of targets hit will increase and attacks will cover a wider area. So her fighting style is definitely unique, and I'm wondering if the same can be said for other characters, because with all the other characters you can either tap square or hold down square to do attacks, but with hers she actually does something different. She starts hitting more enemies and in a wider area of effect. By pressing the triangle button, Aerith will unleash her unique ability, Tempest. You can also charge the attack by holding the triangle button. At maximum charge, it will explode repeatedly after it hits an enemy. This seems to be something unique to Aerith's ability because when it comes to Cloud's Punisher mode and Operator mode, Cloud just switches stances and fights differently. Barry does a single big shot as opposed to his constant fire with the square button. And we know that Tifa's triangle attack upgrades into stronger attacks as she uses her Omni Strike ability. So as of right now, this seems to be something unique to Aerith as far as I know. It remains to be seen if holding down the triangle button, the unique ability button, does anything different for other characters' abilities. Something I did like though is an explanation of how her ability works, because we knew that Tempest was a projectile and exploded, but we didn't know if there's a certain range on it or if it exploded after a couple of seconds, but they said that it explodes repeatedly after hitting an enemy, so it should just kind of fly any distance, like up until it hits something. So you could probably be across the battlefield with Aerith and be able to use Tempest. Next up, we have a look at a couple of Aerith's other abilities, and I believe these are the first time we're seeing these ones. We've heard of one before, like the prayer circle or something like that. I don't remember what it was. Either way, Soul Drain lets Aerith absorb MP from a foe. As she specializes in magic attacks, using this skill will be a necessity in tough fights. So this ability makes sense for Aerith. We talked about it in one of my recent videos. While there wasn't really classes in Final Fantasy VII, if you were to give Aerith a class, she'd be a white mage. So it makes sense to give her an ability where she can absorb MP from enemies. Speaking of white mage, she has a shield ability. Lustrous Shield allows Aerith to summon a magical barrier which will keep enemies at bay and block projectiles. What's more, any attackers who come into contact with the shield will take damage. So you gotta love the fact that the shield itself is a giant flower, nice little touch Square Enix, and this is a pretty useful ability, of course. A more useful ability in like tighter corridors, kind of like what we're seeing right here in this image. Like the smaller the area, the better the shield's gonna be, because enemies can only come at you from one direction. Like in a much more open area, like some of the boss fights that we've seen like with apps or whatever, it'd be a less useful ability, but still useful all around, obviously. Next up, we have some images and info for Shiva that says, characters in Final Fantasy VII Remake can use summon materia. Orbs let them summon an intensely powerful ally into the fight. Queen of Ice Shiva is one such summon. This frosty figure gives an icy glare to enemies and a loving smile to allies. She skates around the battlefield and manipulates the air to freeze enemies in the blink of an eye. Once summoned, Shiva will fight automatically, but you can also issue commands to make her use specific abilities. Heavenly Strike creates a giant glacier and smashes it down onto an opponent. Heavenly Strike was an ability added to Shiva in Final Fantasy X, so it's interesting to see it come back in FF7 Remake. And if I could throw the tinfoil hat on real quick, is that another subtle connection to these games existing in the same world? Summons are governed by a special gauge. When it's empty, they'll disappear, but just before they leave, they'll deliver an especially powerful move. In Shiva's case, it's Diamond Dust, a move fans of the original Final Fantasy VII may remember. Shiva encases enemies in ice and then shatters them in spectacular fashion. Diamond Dust is an iconic move for Shiva. It's something she's had since Final Fantasy III, so it's not really a surprise to see it come back in the remake. On to the juicier bits of info, you gotta save the best for last. Final Fantasy VII Remake takes many locations from the original game and redesigns them and reinterprets them to add additional depth. The story is more detailed too, with more dialogue, story sequences, and a greater portrayal of citizens' lives. The train graveyard is a perfect example of this. Originally used during the construction of Midgar, this area has since become a junkyard for old and abandoned trains. Strong winds make the rusting carriages creak and groan, and odd high-pitched sounds echo over the area. Now this is our first real look at the train graveyard, which absolutely looks awesome, as will any location that's updated with FF7 Remake. Now we had brief looks at this place before, with the ghost enemies and of course Eligor. But this is our first real true look at the location. I just can't wait to explore this place after beating the shit out of Abzu, and I hope it's actually a creepy location to walk around. You may remember this location from the original Final Fantasy VII. In that game, there was no dialogue here, but in Final Fantasy VII Remake, characters will talk to each other as they explore the maze of wreckage. Characters talking to each other based on the environment, something I was hoping would be in the game, and something I talked about a while back, based on the banter between Cloud and Barret in the first Mako reactor. It's also nice to see that based on this image, characters don't just always mindlessly follow you around, they actually do their own thing in certain areas. Gives them more personality, makes them feel more alive. Something else I am hopeful for, and this is just off the top of my head since we're talking about it, is that characters have like residual things they'll say if you come back to an area. So I imagine when we first come through the train graveyard, they're going to talk about it being kind of creepy. But I hope that like once we leave the train graveyard and then come back into it just for exploration or whatever, that they still talk about it being a creepy location. And lastly, it says the new game also adds a new story into this area with multiple event scenes. Which is then followed up by a picture of Aerith like being friendly with the ghost enemies in the train graveyard, which is kind of odd because they were just random encounters in the original game. They obviously were not friendly to us. But maybe that's what the new mission or quest is in this area. Maybe we're helping them. Maybe Eligor's their enemy. They're good guys. We gotta kill Eligor for them. I don't know. Maybe that's why we fight Eligor. I have no idea. And lastly, we get this one image of Cloud, Tifa, and Aerith in a train, which is obviously something from the original game where we actually had to get in the trains and move them out of the way to open up paths to get out of the train graveyard. That's probably what this is alluding to. On to the Shinra building. Here's a look at another area of the game. The headquarters of the Shinra Electric Power Company is a 70-story skyscraper in the center of Midgar. Up on the upper levels, you'll find the offices of President Shinra and the directors, and a memorial floor where you can learn all about the history of Shinra. Alternatively, head to the Visual Entertainment Hall where you can see the latest technology being demonstrated. So that was accompanied with this image of the outside perspective of the Shinra building, which absolutely looks goddamn gorgeous. I also love that there are Shinra soldiers posted outside the building. It never made sense to me in the original game when we run up to the Shinra building to go in there and save Aerith, that we just kind of walked into the building. After us blowing up 2 Mako reactors and then kidnapping Aerith and taking her to the Shinra building, you'd think they'd be on guard. They also mentioned the memorial floor where you can learn about the history of Shinra, and when it comes to gaming, I'm not much of a lore guy. I don't often, in my older jaded age, don't really sit around reading every little thing I can about a game. I did it with Fallout 4, I did it with Witcher 3, but I don't that much anymore. But when it comes to Final Fantasy VII Remake, I'm soaking up every ounce of lore I can find in this game. And just a bit of hopeful wishing on my part is us being able to actually explore the entirety of the Shinra building. 70 floors seems like a lot, but plenty of other games have much bigger locations than that. We'll get a shot of the entrance to the Shinra building, which is nothing new. Here we have a look at the vehicles that are on display in the Shinra building, which as I said in the last video, I'm really into the vehicle design in the Final Fantasy VII universe. But for some reason, we randomly have a normal-looking motorcycle back here. We also get a look at the relaxation floor, which is a better look at it, but it is something we've seen before in the gameplay. And lastly, of course, we have Sephiroth, which I wanted to save till the end. Sephiroth is famed as the finest member of Shinra's elite soldier unit. His gallant efforts in the war with Wutai made him a hero, and he's inspired many a brave youth to join soldier. Sephiroth is believed to have died during a top-secret mission, but there may be far more to the story than people know. And the image that came with this is very interesting. We have, for one, a solid look at his character model in-game, which I think looks great. So when it comes to the character model, I think they nailed it. It looks more or less perfect, other than the belt. The belt kind of stands out. I don't recognize that on any of his character models from other games and stuff. And it does look like he kind of has materia or something in it. You see yellowish color here, light blue color there, which would be command and support materia respectively. But they also could be like lighting situation. I'm not entirely sure. But of course, the main thing that stands out about this picture is the fact that Sephiroth is standing in President Shinra's office, which we'll pause briefly for spoilers. I've been trying to get into the habit of not spoiling the original story too much for people that have not played it yet and might experience it for the first time with the remake. But Sephiroth standing in President Shinra's office can only mean one thing: him killing President Shinra. The big difference here, however, is that in the original game, we did not see Sephiroth in the Shinra building. We just come across the dead body. We don't even see him for the first time until the calm flashback. We don't even physically see him until the cargo ship going from Junon to Costa del Sol. But it does seem like we're going to have some sort of encounter with him within the Shinra building this time around. With all the stuff we've seen of Sephiroth throughout the trailers, you'd be led to believe that he's maybe like some sort of mirage or illusion or something that's haunting Cloud. But with this image, we know that it's at least the real Sephiroth, or if you know the story of Final Fantasy VII, at least mostly Sephiroth, that's actually there in front of us because he's the one that kills President Shinra. And that'll wrap up all the other images that we did not talk about in our last video. A lot to go over there, man. Like I said, we don't normally make these long videos, but sometimes you just kind of have to. A lot of good information in these images and in this article. I think that what's got me most excited, of course, is the train graveyard, getting to see it, but also knowing that it's going to have its own little story element to it. And of course, seeing Sephiroth within the Shinra building, that's probably going to be our first team encounter with Sephiroth, because everything else up to that point should just be Cloud seeing him and nobody else. Should be all visions and things. The video's long enough, so we're just going to wrap it up. Leave your thoughts in the comment section below. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you guys are new and want to get more Final Fantasy VII Remake content. Turn on my notifications. Follow me on Twitter at @TheDashingDavid. And my Discord. Links for the social networks are in the description and in the outro. Later, guys.
Give me a smile, give me forever for a while, give me forever for a while. Quit acting like a baby, or at least less like a child.